It started with a bureaucratic blunder of galactic proportions. Deep in the quiet, uncharted reaches of space, in what had long been considered an insignificant corner of the galactic bureaucracy's territory, an entire sentient species had somehow gone unnoticed. That species was humanity. We had settled into complacency, convinced that our dominion over the stars was complete. So, when radio signals began streaming across the void, crackling with music, news broadcasts, and something called talk shows, the bureaucrats in charge were caught off guard. The signals were everywhere, cluttering the quiet of space with chaotic energy. Worse yet, the humans had already deciphered our language and, without hesitation, had started hailing one of our colony worlds, attempting to make contact. They had been observing us, studying us, for nearly a full year before we had even realized they existed. As it turns out, there was a protocol for this sort of situation, typically used for primitive species who had only recently discovered faster-than-light travel. The galactic bureaucracy begrudgingly extended to humanity a 100-light-year sphere around their home planet as a protective buffer. Unfortunately, this space included a section of Ceridian territory, and that was bound to cause problems later. For now, though, our diplomats had more immediate concerns. When our representatives first met humanity, they were struck by two things: their physical appearance and their astonishing resilience. Earth, it turns out, lay on the upper limits of what we had long considered the threshold for spacefaring life. The planet's gravity was so intense that many of our scientists had previously theorized that life on such worlds would struggle to reach space at all. Indeed, on Earth, early spaceflight had been perilous. Many attempts had ended in failure. Yet, against all odds, humanity had persevered. At first glance, humans were not large by galactic standards. In fact, they were rather short, averaging around 2 meters in height, barely half the size of some of the more imposing species within the bureaucracy. But their strength was another matter. Years of living under immense gravity had gifted them a kind of physical power that was almost terrifying. Even compared to other high-gravity species, humans were monstrously strong. Their muscular frames, although leaner than most, were built for endurance and brute force. And then there was their movement, quick, efficient, almost mechanical. Where most species glided or drifted with a natural grace, humans moved with purpose, with a kind of brutal pragmatism that made them seem like bumbling, oversized children. They had a habit of charging headfirst into situations, solving problems by sheer force. This reputation grew quickly, fed by stories of human engineers smacking malfunctioning machinery into working order with their bare hands. In time, it became a running joke within the bureaucracy. Humans were the blunt instruments of the galaxy, solving their issues with brute strength and tenacity instead of finesse. Yet, despite this reputation, the humans were endlessly optimistic. They possessed an unshakable cheerfulness that made them easy to underestimate. Even when they spoke of their history, full of wars, conflicts, and the painful lessons of a violent past, they seemed embarrassed by it, as though ashamed of their species' darker impulses. The nervous diplomats stammered through descriptions of humanity's warring ages, apologizing profusely for what they perceived as barbarism. It was almost endearing, especially when our diplomats, accustomed to much bloodier histories, laughed it off and reassured them that such conflicts were not unusual in the galaxy. This light-hearted approach did little to dispel the growing number of jokes about humans. They had become the galaxy's favorite comedic subject, a species so unfathomably strong and clumsy that they were laughed at even when people were secretly terrified of what they might do if truly angered. Of course, the humans eventually learned of the jokes. Their reaction? They laughed right along with everyone else, even contributing jokes at their own expense. Somehow, that only made them more likable. Still, there was always a lingering fear, a sense that perhaps humanity was more dangerous than they let on. Their ability to shrug off insults and mockery, to maintain their optimism in the face of adversity, was both impressive and unnerving. After all, how does one handle a species that seems almost impervious to offense? What would it take to provoke them into showing their true colors? The answer came during humanity's early years of expansion. Freed from the constraints of their home system, they began colonizing the buffer space given to them by the bureaucracy. They set up mining stations, trade networks, and colonies with astonishing speed. Their productivity was unparalleled, their strength and relentless work ethic propelling them into an economic golden age. Resources and consumer goods poured into the galaxy, and for a brief time, it seemed as though humanity had found its place. But then, as with all golden ages, their prosperity was threatened. A lucrative trade agreement with the Sarlacc stellar gospel, the galaxy's most pious and peaceful species, had been vital to humanity's success. The Sarlacc were staunchly religious, their economy fueled by the peaceful conversion of others to their faith. The deal had given humanity access to the vast resources of the Sarlacc worlds, bolstering their economy and giving them the edge they needed to compete with larger, more established empires. Then came the scandal. A single offhand comment from a human leader, likening the Sarlacc to galactic Jehovah's Witnesses, was enough to send shockwaves through the stellar gospel. The Sarlacc High Speaker, deeply offended, immediately severed all trade relations with humanity. What had once been the foundation of humanity's burgeoning empire crumbled overnight. And yet, in true human fashion, they simply didn't care. Their economy took a sharp hit, to be sure, and the loss was devastating, but they recovered. Slowly, methodically, and without a hint of bitterness, humanity rebuilt itself. They even issued a formal apology to the Sarlacc, though it did little to mend the broken relationship. Despite the setback, humanity's determination remained unbroken. They continued to expand, continued to build, and continued to grow. It seemed nothing could truly bring them down. They had faced economic ruin, diplomatic disgrace, and the scorn of the galaxy, and they had come out stronger each time. The galaxy had misjudged them. What we thought was carelessness was something much more dangerous: resilience. We had laughed at humanity's blunders, but the more we watched, the more we began to wonder what would happen if the humans ever decided to stop laughing with us. The shock of humanity's economic collapse rippled through the galaxy like a wave crashing against an unyielding shore. When the Sarlacc stellar gospel severed its trade ties, the effect was swift and brutal. Human markets teetered, and for a time, it seemed their expansion into the stars might come to an abrupt halt. But humans had a peculiar trait that many in the galactic bureaucracy had underestimated: they were incredibly resourceful. In the months following the fallout, human companies began pivoting at an alarming rate. Where once they had depended on Sarlacc imports of rare minerals and goods, they now focused on developing new sources. Earth-based corporations and colonies on the edge of human space ramped up mining operations, tapping previously untouched resources in the buffer zones. Humans, known for their brute strength, took to the deep void and the planets with harsher environments, extracting minerals from places other species avoided. Their sheer resilience was nothing short of extraordinary. Even as their economy faltered, they continued pushing forward, never accepting defeat. It was this defiance that allowed them to not only survive the loss of the Sarlacc but to come out stronger than before. However, the economic fallout left scars. Widespread unemployment and unrest in the colonies tested humanity's unity, threatening the fragile alliances they had built within their own species. Amid the internal turmoil, a darker threat loomed, one that had been brewing ever since humanity had claimed its 100-light-year buffer zone. The Ceridian Dominion, an ancient empire of ruthless warlords, had been watching humanity's rapid rise with growing unease. The Ceridians were a warrior species, known for their brutal campaigns and merciless rule over conquered planets. Their empire stretched across hundreds of systems, their warlords feared throughout the galaxy. The problem was, humanity's buffer zone had inadvertently sliced through a key portion of Ceridian territory. To the Ceridians, it was an insult, a sign of weakness from the galactic bureaucracy, which had failed to properly assert its authority. As far as the Ceridians were concerned, the humans were trespassers, and the bureaucrats who had granted them the territory were fools. At first, the Ceridians seemed to tolerate humanity's presence, if only because they believed the young species would implode after the economic hit they had taken. But as the months passed and humans began to recover, Ceridian patience wore thin. Warlord Draxus, one of the most powerful Ceridian leaders, began openly discussing military action. Draxus had carved out an empire through sheer force, his conquests marked by the complete subjugation of dozens of species. He viewed humanity as a nuisance, one that needed to be swiftly dealt with before they became a genuine threat. For the first time since humanity had entered the galactic stage, their very survival was at stake. Draxus's forces were vast, well-armed, and ruthless. The Ceridians boasted some of the most advanced military technology in the known galaxy. Human ships, though resilient, were no match for the precision and power of Ceridian warfleets. The threat was very real, and it was growing by the day. While the galactic bureaucracy watched cautiously, humanity's leaders scrambled to prepare for the inevitable conflict. They could not afford to show weakness now. To do so would invite Draxus to strike, and it was doubtful that they would survive such an assault. In response to the Ceridian threat, humanity began rapidly building up its military forces. Spaceports were repurposed into shipyards, their production focused entirely on building warships. Recruitment efforts skyrocketed, with colonies and Earth itself pouring resources into training new soldiers and pilots. To strengthen their defenses, humans engineered automated drones and AI-controlled fighters, knowing they would need every advantage in the coming conflict. At the same time, diplomatic efforts were ramped up to keep the Ceridians at bay. Human ambassadors reached out to every species they had made contact with, hoping to form alliances that could act as a deterrent to Ceridian aggression. Most of the galactic bureaucracy remained wary of taking sides, but a few smaller species, those who had suffered under Ceridian rule in the past, were quietly willing to provide support. They sent weapons, advisors, and intelligence to help humanity fortify its position. Despite these efforts, there was an underlying fear that it would not be enough. The Ceridians were notorious for their unpredictability and ruthlessness. Draxus, in particular, was infamous for launching attacks without warning. His reputation as a warlord was built on his ability to strike hard and fast, overwhelming his enemies before they could mount any meaningful resistance. Humanity was on high alert, bracing for the worst. Every colony on the edges of human space was fortified, and military fleets were stationed in strategic locations, ready to respond at a moment's notice. The atmosphere was tense, with every passing day feeling like the calm before the storm. It was during this time of heightened anxiety that Draxus made his first move, but it wasn't the all-out assault humanity had feared. Instead, Draxus sent a single emissary to Earth. The emissary, a towering Ceridian with glowing red eyes and the sharp, angular features of his race, arrived unarmed. He stood before the United Earth Federation's High Council and delivered Draxus's ultimatum. "The Ceridian Dominion does not negotiate with weaklings," the emissary growled, his voice low and menacing. "Warlord Draxus demands that you vacate the territories you have stolen from the Dominion. You will have 1 month to comply. If you do not, your species will be wiped from existence." The threat hung in the air like a blade over humanity's neck. The High Council, led by President Alexander Grayson, debated their response in secret chambers. Some argued for diplomacy, insisting that humanity could not withstand a Ceridian attack. Others, including Grayson himself, believed that capitulation would only delay the inevitable. The Ceridians would strike eventually. Giving in to their demands now would only embolden them further. After hours of tense deliberation, the Council made its decision. Humanity would stand its ground. They would not abandon the territory they had fought so hard to build. Draxus's ultimatum was rejected, and preparations for war intensified. There was no longer any question of if the Ceridians would strike, only when. The Ceridian War began without warning, just as humanity feared. Draxus had no intention of waiting the full month before launching his assault. Instead, he struck after 2 weeks, in the dead of night, targeting one of the most vulnerable human colonies on the edge of the buffer zone, New Horizon. The Ceridian fleet descended on the colony with brutal efficiency. Thousands of Ceridian warships, sleek and deadly, blotted out the stars as they opened fire on the planet's defenses. The colony's automated systems responded immediately, scrambling drones and activating energy shields, but they were quickly overwhelmed. Within hours, New Horizons cities were reduced to rubble, its people trapped beneath the ruins as Ceridian ground forces stormed the surface. The devastation sent shockwaves through the United Earth Federation. This was no skirmish. This was a full-scale invasion, and humanity was woefully underprepared. President Grayson addressed the Federation from Earth, his voice resolute but tinged with grim determination. "The Ceridians have brought war to our doorstep," he said. "They believe we are weak. They believe we will cower and retreat. But they are mistaken. We will fight. We will defend our colonies, our people, and our future. We will show the galaxy what humanity is capable of." Across the galaxy, human forces mobilized. Fleets that had been hastily constructed in the months prior were now thrust into action. Earth's defenses were reinforced, and colonies on the outer rim braced for attack. The Ceridians, known for their ruthless blitzkrieg tactics, launched coordinated assaults on multiple fronts, striking at human infrastructure and supply lines. They aimed to cripple humanity's ability to resist, and for a time, it seemed their strategy was working. In the early days of the war, human losses were heavy. Entire fleets were obliterated in battles against Ceridian warlords, and several colonies fell under Ceridian occupation. Humanity's military, though strong in spirit, lacked the experience and technological edge that the Ceridians possessed. It became clear that if humanity wanted to survive, they would have to adapt, and fast. The turning point came during the Battle of Vesta, a strategically crucial asteroid belt that served as a major resource hub for the Federation. The Ceridians launched a massive assault, intending to seize control of the asteroid fields and deny humanity access to vital materials. Human forces, led by Admiral Sarah Valen, were vastly outnumbered, but they had a secret weapon, a new class of warship developed in secret over the past year. These ships, known as the Wraith class, were designed specifically for guerrilla warfare in space. They were equipped with advanced cloaking technology, allowing them to strike from the shadows and disappear before the enemy could respond. Unlike traditional human warships, which relied on brute force, the Wraiths emphasized speed, stealth, and precision. As the Ceridian fleet approached, Admiral Valen ordered her forces to retreat. At least, that's what it appeared to be. In reality, her fleet was lying in wait, hidden among the asteroid belt, while the Wraiths circled around the Ceridian armada. As soon as the Ceridians moved in to occupy Vesta, the Wraiths struck with surgical precision. They disabled the Ceridian command ships, leaving the enemy fleet in disarray, and then systematically picked off the remaining ships. The Battle of Vesta was a resounding victory for humanity. Not only did it halt the Ceridian advance, but it also demonstrated that the Federation was capable of more than just reactive defense. They could fight back and win. News of the victory spread quickly, bolstering morale across human space. For the first time since the war began, it seemed that humanity might have a chance. Over the next several months, the tide of war began to shift. Human engineers, learning from their early losses, developed new weapons and defenses that could counter Ceridian technology. Drones were upgraded with advanced AI, allowing them to fight more autonomously and effectively. Human warships were fitted with experimental energy shields, and ground forces adopted new tactics inspired by Ceridian battle strategies. The Federation began to hit back hard, launching offensives against Ceridian-occupied worlds and retaking lost colonies. The war became a brutal stalemate, with both sides suffering heavy casualties. Ceridian warlords clashed with human admirals in fierce space battles, while ground troops fought for control of key planets. Planets like Helios Prime and Nova Terra became battlegrounds, their once thriving cities reduced to rubble as human and Ceridian soldiers clashed in brutal firefights. Despite their setbacks, the Ceridians remained relentless. Warlord Draxus, enraged by humanity's resilience, personally led several attacks, driving his warriors into a frenzy. His hatred for the humans had grown into an obsession. He viewed them as an affront to the Ceridian way of life, and he vowed to see them wiped from the galaxy. However, the Ceridian warlords were not as united as they appeared. As the war dragged on, cracks began to form in their alliance. Some warlords, frustrated by Draxus's single-minded focus on humanity, began questioning his leadership. The Ceridian dominion was vast, and many warlords had their own empires to defend. They couldn't afford to pour all of their resources into a protracted war against a species that refused to break. Sensing an opportunity, the Federation's intelligence networks began working to exploit these divisions. Human spies infiltrated Ceridian ranks, spreading rumors and discord among the warlords. Sabotage missions targeted Ceridian supply lines, further straining their resources. Meanwhile, human diplomats quietly reached out to warlords who might be persuaded to withdraw their support from Draxus. Though no one expected a full defection, weakening the unity of the Ceridian forces could buy humanity the time it needed. As the war entered its second year, it became clear that Draxus's grand crusade against humanity was faltering. Human fleets had grown stronger, and their tactics had become more sophisticated. Colonies that had once been on the brink of collapse were now heavily fortified, their people standing firm in the face of the Ceridian onslaught. For the first time since Draxus had launched his invasion, it seemed that humanity had the upper hand. The Ceridian Dominion, once seen as an unstoppable force, was beginning to show signs of straying. Warlord Draxus was still a formidable foe, but his forces were no longer invincible. In a galaxy that had once written humanity off as a minor player, there was a growing recognition that humans were far more dangerous than anyone had anticipated. Draxus, however, was not finished. He had one final plan, a last, desperate gamble that would either crush humanity or destroy the Ceridians forever. The Ceridian War reached its devastating climax in the battle over Earth itself. Warlord Draxus, furious at humanity's resistance and betrayal within his own ranks, decided to make a bold, final move. He gathered the largest fleet the Ceridian Dominion had ever assembled, an armada vast enough to darken the skies of 1,000 worlds, and set a course straight for humanity's home planet. Draxus's goal was simple: annihilation. The United Earth Federation had been preparing for this moment. After years of war, humanity had learned much from their alien adversaries. Their fleets were stronger, their soldiers battle-hardened, and their technology greatly advanced. Earth had become a fortress, its orbital defenses the most sophisticated in human history. Yet, even with these preparations, the sight of the Ceridian Armada arriving at the edge of the solar system sent a chill through every human heart. President Grayson made his final address to the people of Earth just hours before the Ceridians arrived. His face was worn with the weight of years of conflict, but his eyes burned with unshakable resolve. "This is it," he said, his voice carried across the planet's global communication networks. "The Ceridians believe they can break us by striking at the heart of our civilization. But they have underestimated us at every turn. Today, we stand united not just for our survival, but for the survival of everything we have built. We will show the galaxy that Earth will never fall." The battle began with a Ceridian bombardment from orbit. Energy blasts from thousands of warships rained down on Earth's defenses, targeting military installations, energy grids, and cities alike. The Federation Space Fleet responded in kind, launching their most advanced warships into the fray. Massive space battles unfolded over the skies of Earth, with human and Ceridian ships locked in deadly combat. The Wraith-class ships proved invaluable, using their stealth capabilities to disrupt the Ceridian fleet and strike at key targets, but the sheer number of Ceridian vessels made victory seem impossible. On the ground, Earth's surface became a war zone. Draxus unleashed his ground forces in waves, deploying Ceridian shock troops to land in key cities and strategic locations. Humanity fought back with everything they had: elite soldiers, drones, and even the newly developed exosuits that gave infantry the power to take on Ceridian warriors hand to hand. Battles raged in the streets of London, New York, Shanghai, and countless other cities as humanity's forces fought to defend their home. Despite their efforts, the Ceridians pressed their advantage. They managed to breach several of Earth's orbital defense platforms, crippling humanity's ability to maintain control of the skies. Ground forces were pushed to their limits, with entire divisions wiped out in desperate last stands. Draxus himself landed on Earth, leading his elite forces in a direct assault on the capital of the United Earth Federation, New Geneva. His goal was to decapitate humanity's leadership and force the Federation to surrender. As Draxus's forces advanced toward New Geneva, all hope seemed lost. The Ceridian warlords' fury was unmatched, and even with their advanced technology, humanity struggled to hold the line. But just as Draxus prepared to deliver the final blow, something unexpected happened. The cracks within the Ceridian dominion had grown wider. Draxus's obsession with Earth had alienated many of the other warlords, who were now dealing with rebellions and civil unrest within their own territories. Unbeknownst to Draxus, several of these warlords had decided to abandon the war entirely. In the chaos of the Dominion, a coup was taking place. Warlords who had once supported Draxus now saw an opportunity to seize power for themselves. They ordered their fleets to withdraw from the battle over Earth, leaving Draxus isolated. The sudden retreat of nearly half of the Ceridian armada shifted the momentum. Humanity, though battered and bloodied, seized the opportunity. The remaining human fleets regrouped and launched a counteroffensive, targeting the exposed Ceridian command ships. Ground forces, now bolstered by reinforcements from other colonies, launched coordinated strikes on Ceridian positions, pushing the invaders back. In a final, desperate confrontation, Draxus faced off against Admiral Sarah Valen, who had led humanity to victory in the Battle of Vesta. The two commanders had come to embody the war, one driven by blind rage and vengeance, the other by tactical brilliance and unyielding resolve. Their ships clashed in orbit above Earth, with the fate of the planet hanging in the balance. In a daring maneuver, Valen used the last of her fleet's Wraith-class ships to disable Draxus's flagship's engines, leaving it vulnerable. With a precision strike, her forces destroyed the ship's core, killing Draxus and ending his campaign of terror. The Ceridian forces, leaderless and disorganized, quickly fell apart. Within days, the invasion had been repelled, and Earth was saved. Though humanity had won the war, the cost was staggering. Earth had been left shattered, its cities devastated, its people scarred. Millions had died in the conflict, and the damage to the planet's infrastructure would take decades to repair. The colonies fared little better, many of them still recovering from the Ceridian occupation and destruction. In the aftermath of the war, the United Earth Federation was left to rebuild, not just physically, but emotionally. The victory over the Ceridians had proven humanity's strength and resilience, but it had also revealed the true horrors of war. President Grayson, who had led humanity through the darkest days, announced his resignation, choosing to step down and let new leaders take the reins in this time of healing. Admiral Valen became a hero across the galaxy, celebrated for her tactical genius and for delivering the final blow that ended the war. She, too, chose to retire, passing on her command to younger officers who had risen to prominence during the conflict. The Wraith-class ships, once a symbol of humanity's desperation, became a cornerstone of the Federation's new defense strategy, ensuring that humanity would never again be caught unprepared. As the galaxy took stock of the war's aftermath, one thing became clear: humanity had earned its place among the stars. The Ceridian Dominion, once the dominant power in the region, was fractured and in disarray. Warlords squabbled for control, their unity shattered by Draxus's folly. Meanwhile, the Federation had emerged stronger than ever, its people united in a way they hadn't been before the war. The Ceridian War had come to an end, but its legacy would shape the future of the galaxy for generations to come. And as humanity rebuilt its shattered world, one truth remained clear: they would never forget the price they had paid to survive, and they would never allow themselves to be threatened again.